Hey y'all, it's zentaro in the building, right? And I came out here to tell y'all the two techniques that I learned writing my books that really improved the quality of my storytelling. And I'm gonna talk about two things, right? Number one is foreshadowing, right? And I know a lot of people talk about how important foreshadowing is, but they don't ever tell you how to do it, right? And how to do it in a way that's convincing and not, right, too on the nose, right? So there's foreshadowing, but not only that, how to actually do good character development. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've read a lot of books, right? And I've written a lot of books where, the characters, are just too obvious. Everything is explained. We know why they do what they do, right? And what their backstory is. And so the mystery is taken away, right? And the first thing we're going to start with is how I do foreshadowing. Because my foreshadowing it's also like tied into how I write. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people talk about like Stephen King and his style of writing. It's more of like freestyle. He doesn't plot the ending. He doesn't have a whole outline of how the story should go, right? Now, I'm not saying you should go and do his way of writing, because there's definitely drawbacks, but I'd say still plot, still have an outline, right? But make it more of like a general idea of where the story should go, right? And a general idea of the backstories and everything, but have it in a way where it's like, it's adaptable. Like, you can change it on the go, right? And so what I like to do, right, is when I write a scene, especially when you're writing the beginning of the book, don't overthink it, right? Just do it. Just get it out, the idea that you have, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be messy, right? But if you sit too much on the overthinking process, right, and how to make it the best opening ever, right? You're watching YouTube tutorials, it's like you're not going to make it too far, right? What do I mean by that? Like, by the time everything is done, you've done over edited, right, and stripped it down to where it's lifeless, right? Because that stuff that you have that's on your heart, if you just get it out without putting it through, the process of editing it immediately based off of what you think is right or correct, then you allow yourself to get farther. You have more, what's the word, like you just achieve more progression. You're gonna write more. And so once you finish writing everything that was on your heart, right, not only are you gonna end up with more stuff, you're gonna get further in the book, right? But it's more raw and honest, right? But how do you do that, right? Okay, so you have the idea, you want to get it out. You also have to be honest with yourself. You have to ask yourself, who am I? Why am I writing this, right? What part of me has something to say? Hold on. So once you really think about the part of you that has something to say and the message, right? It could be just tiny. Then you go on to the next part. So it's like, okay, we did chapter 1, or we did just a couple scenes in chapter 1, right? Then you sit with it, right? So I call it the write and the sit period. So once you sit with it and start reading it, just analyze, like, okay, how does this make me feel? What's the deeper meaning behind all this? What is this really trying to say, right? And just by sitting on it, and you can sit on it for as long as you want to, right? But once you go through that process, right, then you go to the next scene or the next chapter, but the next portion of the story, right, with that in mind. And so you consider the context, because whatever context is established in one scene, it changes what's going to happen in the next one, right? Now, the best way to do this, right, what Stephen King does is he has like a very complex situation with very interesting characters, right? And it's almost like an equation, right? We start with a problem. Like there's this big problem, right? And by the end of the story, everything gets solved, right? Or a majority of it gets solved. And so each chapter, right, is like the work that's put in to make sure this shit resolves, right? Like imagine, okay, we got a group of friends, right? But there's a love triangle, right? And one of the characters, you know, their dad's an alcoholic and like abuses him, and that impacts like how he acts, and so he lashes out at other people because what he's going through. And you have another girl who's super rich, right? Completely disconnected from reality. It's set in a small town, right? Like all these characters just have all these problems, you know? And they don't mesh well together, you know? It's a little toxic, it's a little dysfunctional, right? Combined with, let's say, you know, a supernatural event occurs, right? Like monsters from a different dimension start flooding in. And this group of dysfunctional friends, right? They all get powers now. It's like, okay, now they have to work together to overcome the goal, right? So it's like now we have a reason to understand these characters more, right? It has a reason to push the story forward because it's like now every chapter has an opportunity to keep advancing these plot threads, I call them, right? So it's like, okay, the kid who with the alcoholic dad, that's a storyline to advance, right? How is it right now in the beginning of the story? How is it going to be in the middle, and how is it going to be in the end? Each character has something like that, right? Where you have character arcs. So you just have to keep this in mind. Keep in mind where they're at and how they'll change. Perhaps the rich, pretentious girl eventually becomes down to earth, you know? How does that happen? You know, perhaps she really starts to connect with her friends and realizes that the life she lives is completely different and that they have struggles that she does not understand. And that encourages her to have genuine compassion when she was looking down, you know, and feeling, you know, like she's the shit, you know what I'm saying? Like I got all the new clothes and all the new stuff. And so that's room to develop the characters, right? Now you have a reason to push the story forward. But now, right, when it comes to that, you see, when you make progress in a story, always come back to the beginning. You come back to the beginning because it's like things that didn't have value, right, or meaning, or just spaces in the story where it's like not much is going on. Now you can add little like clues and details that don't mean much on the first read, but because you already know where the story is already headed, like, okay, 5 chapters down the line, 10 chapters down the line, right? You can plant a seed, right, that shows that if you reread it, if the reader goes back to the beginning, it's going to hit different because they're going to be like, damn, it was in front of our face. Like, that's a power foreshadowing, right? Or it's like prophecy almost. Like, think about it like this. Like, okay, there's a character that's going to betray the group and become evil, right? But you didn't know that when you first started writing the book. But then you go over and you add little details and you change minor things, right? To hint that at some point, this character has the capacity for evil, right? Like, let's say, like, how can I put this? Okay, it's the main character's best friend, right? When the main character gets all these powers, right, and he's like the strongest, his best friend gets powers too, but perhaps we see like jealousy, right? Like a small jealousy that don't seem too much, right? But that jealousy continues to spiral out of control like an avalanche and becomes you know, like a key detail and foreshadowing as to why he betrays the group, right? It's like small stuff like that. You can have your own version of that, but okay, so that's foreshadowing. How about character development? How do we make it, realistic? Because sometimes we can read or write characters, right, that it's like everything is too obvious. Like, we know why they're doing what they're doing, but perhaps you don't know that the kid in the friend group, his dad's an alcoholic and he's being abused, right? And he has a real rough time. You don't know that. All you know is that he's an asshole, right? So this kid's just an asshole. Maybe he's a bully, right? And so we see him bullying other kids. We see him being a jerk. We see him doing all these things that give us the impression, oh, okay, right? This kid's just a jerk. He's not likable, screw him. We're not rooting for this guy, right? And so it hits different when later in the story the truth comes out. But between now and when the truth comes out, right, we show it in their behaviors, right? Like, okay, perhaps like we see them really become emotional and upset and volatile when they feel like someone is talking down to them, right? Or belittling them. But it's something, right, that causes them to be a jerk, right? So it's like, okay, authority figures. Let's say this character, he's cussing out and disrespecting the teacher, and he's doing all these things and acting out, right? And so now we had the idea of making this character the bully, right? We already know the backstory, but we haven't said it yet, right? That's for the author to hold on to until it's the right time, right? But knowing that, right, then it's like, okay, well, how are we going to put him in situations to show that he's the bully? We don't tell the reader he's the bully, we show them, right? And so the way to show him is through situations where all we know is what they do, right? So it's like, by the time we're introduced to this character, he's cussed out the teacher, he shoved this kid, right? He's doing all this, he's acting reckless, right? He's a class clown, always seeking attention, right? And so it's like, the author knows why that's going on, right? But now, this is an opportunity to do what I call manipulation, right? You manipulate the reader, right? By playing on their expectations. From what the reader is seeing, they expect, okay, this is just a jerk, this is clearly a bad guy, he's just gonna become the villain. But by the end, he's the most likable character, right? But what makes a reader interested in your character is when they're thinking about them, right? And when you change a reader's perception of a character drastically, and it shows the reader themselves, damn, just like the kids and the parents and everybody in the book, I judged this character, right? And I wrote them off as just a jerk and an asshole. But when I figured out his backstory and what that person went through, right, it made me feel that much deeper for the character, right? Because now it shows that they're multifaceted, right? This character has nuance, it has depth, right? So it's no longer a story about black and white, right? But it's a moral gray area, because it's not it's not okay what he does as a character, right? But now you understand, and by understanding, you have sympathy and empathy and compassion. And so now you just made the reader feel for a character who in the beginning of the story they did not like, right? And that is very powerful, right? Because that teaches the reader a valuable lesson. So there's wisdom imbued in the story. They don't know they're learning a lesson until they finish the character's arc and they realize, oh, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Nothing is what it seems at first, right? Perhaps, it's better to have more patience and really try to understand somebody before we jump to conclusions. And you just taught them that, right? Through this technique. And so that's really what makes us gravitate towards characters like think about Malfoy. Draco Malfoy, people are attached to him, right? Because at first you're like, oh, Draco Malfoy's the worst. But once you realize like what his life is really like, what it's like to be him, like you get it, right? And you feel bad, like, okay, he's not the worst. You know what I'm saying? Because he's not actually a villain like some other characters. You know what I'm saying? So the redemption arc is believable. So that's personally my way of doing redemption arcs, honestly. That's my way of doing foreshadowing and character development, right? But that just applies to one single character. You see, the hardest thing you can do is to create a believable redemption arc, right? And what I described, I mean, he's not fully redeemed by the time you realize his backstory, right? But perhaps the character opens up to another character and it's like, this is what I'm going through, man. Like, and perhaps like it drives him to say, I'm sorry. You know, perhaps the character has their own realization that this is why I act the way I do and it's not okay. Perhaps that character sees the real impact of what they're doing and how the other kids react to them. Like, oh, they're afraid of me, right? And nobody likes me, you know? And I feel alone and I'm going through this pain, right? And it's like for him to realize because of his relationship with his dad, you know, that's why he's acting the way he's acting, you know? And that pain, sitting in that pain, right? With that, and it's enough where he can't sit with himself anymore, right? It's like before he was ignorant, he was moving on autopilot, he was not aware, right? But it's like the good redemption arc is not, oh, okay, oh, I'm sorry, everything's good. But no, they become aware of how they come off, right? And they sit with the pain and they sit with themselves and they say, I can't keep being this person. I can't take it anymore. I have to change. Something has to change. And so that's what drives them to apologize. That's what drives them to seek help, like actually have someone to talk to, right? So perhaps he doesn't have nobody to talk to about this, right? But now that he's actually genuinely opened up to these friends, right, that he has, that he's now discovered he can actually rely on them and trust them, he's allowed to heal from that now. And now we can actually see that he's changed. He does not do what he did in the beginning. But now imagine combining that with the fantasy story, right? Because, see, fantasy, right, on its own can end up becoming boring unless you have multiple things going on. So it's like, okay, the relationship dynamics, the character arcs, how they change over time, right? While they're fighting monsters, right? And demons. That's what makes it powerful. And you'll gravitate towards the story. So when you're writing, keep that in mind. You know, you want to accomplish at the same time, right? World building, right? That's natural, where the characters gradually discover through their own eyes, right? So no exposition. Character development and them changing and evolving as people, right? And, you know, really getting to know these characters on a deeper level, right? But that takes time. You know, you have to really sit with these characters. So, yeah, that's really what I wanted to say, y'all. Like, when you're writing, just focus on getting it out there, right? And once you've already written what you gotta write, then you just do a run through. So keep doing run-throughs over the same stuff, right? Work little by little. Rome wasn't built in a day, but you do it brick by brick, right? So it's like, okay, I wrote my first 2 chapters, right? You know, it took me a little minute. Okay, sit with it, read it, try and feel what was trying to be birthed in that, and then rework it, right? Start changing small little things, right, to get closer to where you want to get to, right? And it's that period where new ideas will just come to you in that process. Yes, sir. And when you do that, right, you learn, how to craft a world that feels real, that feels lived in, So just take time. Have patience with yourself, right? Don't be too hard on yourself, and don't overthink. Just go out on a limb and wing it and freestyle it, because no matter what, you can fix what you don't get right in the freestyle later, right? Your first draft isn't what's going to end up being published. You will go through over that stuff over and over again until you get to where you got to get to. So it's just like, work little by little, right? And when you go through it in that way, the ideas will just start coming to you slowly by slowly. And not only that, understand that it takes time to create a story, right? But remember that your life that you're living and you as a person changing has an impact on your story. And you writing the story, right, will show you things about yourself that you didn't know, right? So it's like, if you feel like, okay, I don't have an idea right now, I'm in a creative block, that's fine. Take a pause, right? In fact, go and just keep living life and have more experiences, because your life experiences will continue to add depth to your story, right? For me, it's like I stopped writing for like almost 2 years, right? And by the time I came back, I had so much more to say in my story and so much more to write because of the things I experienced, right? So it's like, by going through it in that way, it's not going to feel like a chore, right? It's not something where you should force yourself to write as much as possible, right? But by doing this, by the time you're done, I promise you will make a story that will make you cry. You will tear up reading your own work, because what you put into it was your own life, right? You put your soul into it. I'm not going to lie, when you write like that, it's the best way to write, but also it leaves you very vulnerable. It feels like you're bearing yourself naked in front of the readers, right? Because you will put your own traumas, your own pain into this, right? And not only that, but that process will help you heal that and understand it from a different perspective. Because just from, your knowledge of your life, it's like by putting it and transposing it onto different characters and seeing how they react really puts into perspective what you went through, and you are able to understand yourself more, right? What it means to heal, what it means to find love, or to change, right? Or to see your own role in your life. Sometimes you can put yourself in a situation, right, or a way of life that's not making you happy, right? So it's like you learn more about yourself and what it even means to live life by writing. That's how powerful it is. So even if, right, there's a lot of people where it's like, okay, well, I just wrote my book and I published it and I ain't get that many sales or whatever, and that feels discouraging. I know I published a book and this shit didn't go nowhere, right? But it's like, I had to take a step back and realize the books are truly a side effect. Like, the real effect that it had was on who I became as a person writing, right? How much it changed me. Because I know for a fact I'm not the same person I was before I started writing books, right? And writing stories. Because you learn a lot about life. You learn that life is a book. You're a character in a book. And every day is a page turning, right? And periods in your lives are different chapters, right? And so it's like, you start to see that the way you love your characters is the way God, the universe, loves you, and that your story is also built. You write your own story with your actions, with the way you live. So when I say if you don't have an idea for your book, That's okay. Put it down and start living for real, right? And by the time you're done, you change as a person when you go through things, right? Because when you write characters, it's like, okay, you put them in fucked up situations, but that's the only way they're going to learn and evolve, right? But then you sit down, right, and analyze your own life. Wait a minute. I'm constantly being put in fucked up situations. But perhaps that's because it's the only way you're going to learn. Think about it. Harry Potter had a fucked up backstory, right? But that allowed him to grow so much. That's why we love him. Because he came from 0 to 100. So when you're writing and you're trying to create a very interesting character, you'll find yourself placing your character at 0 when they have nothing, right? So it's like, think about it. If your character that you worked on that's so legendary, if they had a chance to talk to you, do you think the beginning part of them that's going through all the fucked up shit is gonna like you? They might cuss you out. I know for a fact, one of my own characters cussed me out. I know, right? But that sets up the story, right? So that they have a higher ceiling to go to, right? The character has to start as 0, has to have nothing, has to be at the bottom. Because by the time we see them get to the top, right? It actually has value. That character can appreciate it, right? The readers are going to back them, right? Because they're the underdog. We all love the underdog. So it's like writing good underdog stories, because that's what you're going to find yourself doing. Will have you realize, wait, I'm the underdog in my own life. And you know what? That's the best thing that could ever happen to me. Because when you're the underdog in real life, yeah, people are going to shit on you and they're going to crap on you, right? But that's because you're the one that is going to do something great, right? When you make a character in your story and the one that's going to be the greatest, why is it that the one that's going to be the greatest is always at the lowest? There's always this super mega underdog, right? In fact, when we look for shows, we look for what's underrated, right? Well, the top 10 most underrated anime, underrated show, underrated artists, right? Everybody's like, oh man, I love underground artists, So think about it, right? If you're the underdog in your own life, if you're underrated, that's a good thing. You're what the people want. You're what the people fucking need, are looking for. People look for what's underrated. They look for the underground artists. So that's the type of shit that writing teaches you. Alright, man. Look, all I'm gonna say is chase your dreams. Okay. Even if you don't want to write books, bro. Anything. Right? But just remember, if you feel like the underdog and that you're at the bottom and shit's not working out for you, just invest in yourself. Just wait and see. Right? Harry Potter didn't know he was going to become who he became when he was living, right, in his stepfamily's house underneath the staircase with cobwebs and spiders, being treated like garbage. He was treated like garbage before he ever became who he was, before he ever went to Hogwarts. In fact, when they tried to give him the invitation to come to Hogwarts, they kept denying it. They kept hiding the letters. Think about the movie. It literally, millions of letters had to fly supernaturally to his house. Okay? And he became one of the greatest that ever was. So if you right now are in a place where you feel like nobody appreciates you, that you're Harry Potter underneath the stairs, being treated like garbage, like a slave, by the people that's supposed to love and protect you, remember that every great person had that backstory. That's the power of storytelling. Jesus was underrated, bro. Nobody loved and appreciated him when he was alive, bro. He had more love and appreciation from people, right, who were never alive when he was alive. The people that actually were in his life did not love or appreciate him like that. So think about it. It's because you're great. That's the price of greatness. Alright, y'all. It's Zentaro. I want to give y'all some wisdom. Peace, love, and harmony.